My name is Anna Serin, and I'm Director of Listings Development with the Canadian Securities Exchange. Today I had the chance to sit down with Brent Gilchrist, who is CEO of Dean's Knight here in Vancouver. Brent is an accomplished finance executive with extensive experience in the investment and banking sectors. He is president of JDS Resources, the JDS group of companies, venture capital and private equity arm responsible for investment management, acquisitions, and project financing for JDS opportunities. Brent was co-founder of JDS Silver, which developed and sold the Silvertip mine in BC in 2017. Prior to joining JDS group of companies, Brent led the management of individual portfolios for RBC Dominion Securities, the investment branch of Royal Bank of Canada, for 7 years. Brent started his career as a professional hockey player with the National Hockey League, with 5 teams drafted by the Montreal Canadiens. Brent was a member of the 1998 Stanley Cup champion Detroit Red Wings. He retired from the NHL in 2003. Join me for the rest of this journey with Brent Gilchrist. Hi, my name's Anna Serin. I'm Director of Listings Development with the Canadian Securities Exchange. You're joining us here for a spotlight on the one and only Brent Gilchrist. Brent Gilchrist, you've been around the mining sector, the finance sector in Vancouver for a very long time, or in British Columbia. You started your career out in a little bit of a different start. You started out in the NHL. We're going to talk about that.
Great.
You moved into the finance sector, and you are now president of JDS Resources. You are CEO of Dean's Knight. We're going to talk about all of these things and all things Canadian mining today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, that sounds great. Thank you for having me.
Okay, let's start with the really good stuff. Let's talk about your hockey career.
Yeah, well, that was what I grew up doing, right? It's an awesome way to make a living. That's all I can say. I mean, as I grew up, like most Canadian kids, I grew up in Vernon, British Columbia. That's all I wanted to do from a young age, and was fortunate enough to have some talent and have a pretty good work ethic, and had a lot of people help me along the way. So. Yeah, it was, it really was about focus, and I think about that a lot in my life today, that what I did as a hockey player, I draw on every day. I think it's about focus and preparation and work ethic. So nothing's really changed in my life that way.
Well, you had a very successful career, and it was quite neat to watch. When did you leave your hockey career? Was it in the 90s?
Almost, 2003. So I started in the NHL in 1988 and left in 2003, and I had a good plan to leave hockey, and I really was passionate about the capital markets and investing, and I pursued it right away. I mean, I think I pursued it before I left hockey, but really, never really took any time off, to tell you the truth. I had some licensing to do and a bit further education, but really jumped right into the investment business with RBC. Basically a year after I quit playing.
I've seen a trend actually of professional athletes that have moved into the capital markets, especially on the junior side. I think there's an entrepreneurial spirit that comes from professional athletes. Would you say that that's true?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the numbers, but certainly I'm running into more and more ex-players. Some of them I know, some of them I don't, and some of them I either kind of crossed over and played against or not. But there's always that camaraderie, and it's interesting. It's fun to do business with guys that did what you did before, and I kind of see the same passion in what they're doing. I think that's the biggest thing for players when they leave the game in any sport, any athlete, is when you're finished, what are you passionate about? Because I think the athletes do have an incredible amount to give, because like I said before, the focus and the preparation is always with you, but I think it's finding something you're really passionate about.
A lot of hard work, a lot of dedication, and dealing with losses as well as wins, right? I think that's something we understand in the mining space and capital markets.
I mean, I think for every business you have to understand that whatever you're trying to do, enough no's is going to mean a yes, and just the setbacks. And in the mining business that, my great friend Jeff Stibbard really got me into, it's amazing how much goes wrong. And it almost feels like is anything going to go right? But I explained my life in the NHL as this. If I could show you what one NHL shift looked like, most of the shift is failure. So you get knocked off the puck, you lose the puck, you get slashed, you get cross-checked, you get knocked down, you fight through a check. At the end of the shift, you may score a goal, but if you look back through the shift, most of it was failure. And I think that, when I talk to young people particularly, that's a little bit like a very intense version of life. Everything you're trying to do, there's always resistance in front of you. And if you battle through that, you might score a goal at the end of the shift.
Well, it certainly is a good example for the mineral exploration space, that's for sure. Okay, so you moved into RBC Securities, you were doing the investment side of things, you were raising capital. What made the shift to go from that to JDS Resources, where you were, hands on the ground within the mining space and the operations side?
Yeah, really good question. I think, well, I'll back it up a little bit. I mean, I really wanted to be in the investment business, and I wanted to help people. I did a lot of that through my career. And I started in like 05, 06, and then came along 2008. And it was a really difficult time, and I would have been not necessarily a young person, but obviously a young investment professional in my career. But what I found when we came out of 2008, 2009, that was actually the best part of the business. Because if you're trying to help people, create wealth and build wealth for themselves, 2008, 2009 were really where you'd earn all your money. And to talk to people about that there's no panic in this, that this is what capital markets do, I realized after we came out of it, that was the most fun. My friend Jeff Stibbard, who started JDS kind of about the same time I started in the investment business, we were doing a lot of business together. He was a large client of mine and a good friend. And he asked me sort of starting in 2009 when we came out of it to come and help him. Engineering construction firm, mining engineer by trade, but he wanted to do more. He wanted to build projects for ourselves, and he wanted a partner to do that with. So all the knowledge we had at JDS from engineering and construction and mining, great. I took on the other challenge of putting the business together. We'd look for assets that we could buy and build ourselves, and I ended up, along with Jeff, raising the capital and building it and then selling it. So that's how I got here. And people ask me that, oh, how did you get here? And I'm like, this is how I got here.
Well,
how
listen,
do you know where you're going to end up?
You and Jeff have been a force in the mining sector. It's amazing. You guys have worked together for almost 20 years now, is that right?
Yeah, well, 20 years as friends and doing business, on the investment side. But, formally, I became president of JDS Resources around 2011. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You guys have had a good run. You're still at it, and definitely built quite the name for yourselves within the mining community. 2008 was interesting. Some of our viewers might not remember 2008.
That's true, yeah.
I was a broker actually with HSBC Securities in 2008. It was a really interesting time to understand how people maneuvered with their investment dollars. I think if you were around in that time, it definitely taught us a lot, and the people that got through it and came out on the other side definitely did see a better example of what the markets could look like. I think it's been interesting because we've had a very interesting few years now recently that have had a lot of different tides that have been turning. And we'll get into that because
Sure.
now you're back at it, but you've combined JDS and your finance career, and you've put them together in one. We'll talk about that after. Tell us about JDS Mining. What did it do? You were a big impact in the community, and you brought a lot to the public companies and exploration companies that we foster so well
Right.
out here and out west and in the capital markets. What was JDS?
Well, I think it's a unique brand, and it really founded by Jeff, and really his ethos. It really breeds in it, and he got a lot of people to believe in that. Jeff was a mining engineer and came up in the BHP days, and he built some of the biggest mines in the country as an employee of BHP. When he realized that business had changed, like many businesses, including the investment, that the big firms used to have their own teams, feasibility, engineering. They'd have to, study the project, get it ready for construction. They'd have to build it and then operate it, and that sort of left. So their consultants fill most of that gap now, and Jeff felt like he could start a company that really felt that as more like an owner's team. And when we get a project and our people go to work for a project, we don't want to feel like contractors or consultants. We want to feel like we're part of the owner's team to help them there's many more consultants in the business than just developing their project. We want to be the partner of resource developers and maximize the value of that. So from engineering to construction, I think we're a bit unique the way we look at things, like fit for purpose and try to cut to the real value rather than just selling companies man hours. We want to find the value in those projects.
You offered a holistic approach to execution on everything from compliance programs to building mines, right?
Absolutely, safety, environment, construction, consulting, and even startup operation, or even supporting operating mines that may have been in operation for a long time, and fly the SWAT team in there and give people a hand.
I think one thing that JDS really brought to the capital markets was that there isn't a big understanding when people invest, when they do a private placement or they invest in a mining company or an exploration company, what is actually happening in the background, and that the programs that need to be had, the technical people involved, the engineering involved, getting up to the property, and all of the infrastructure that needs to be built around that. I mean, it's a huge endeavor that happens behind those press releases, right?
Yes, and I think it's difficult for most investors to understand, the feasibility studies and the technical behind that. I mean, even before that, because we're not geologists at JDS, we come after the deposit is defined so that we can understand how to make economics out of it. But even go a step further into the geology is very difficult for the average person and even an experienced investor to understand what it's going to look like when it comes out as a deposit, and then is it going to come out and look like an economic deposit that we can mine and make money at. And that's really complicated. And as we know, the business is, as Canadians, we're the best in the world at mining. And our Australian friends might argue with this, but anyway, but there's so much goes into permitting and to community relations and engagement, and also the environment. And, the mining business has to stand up and be much more vocal about how good we are at reducing the impacts of mining. Everything makes an impact, and mining does make an impact on the environment, but how do we reduce that and still be able to produce the products that move us and feed us every day?
We have to self-advocate a little bit. Okay, you and I spent some time together at the Beaver Creek Precious Metals Summit, and you told me an interesting fact that I want you to bring up about gold companies in Canada.
Yeah, so, when we speak to clients and this is just, transitioning to the Dean's Night, when you speak to clients or people that you'd like to be clients, they ask you the best questions. And sometimes you have a really good answer for it, on the tip of your tongue, or sometimes you have not a weak answer, but not maybe a complete answer. So, I was asked during a presentation, Brent, you seem very confident in Canada, and maybe the room wasn't that confident. I said, well, listen, I'm concerned about probably the same things everybody else is, our personal tax rates, and an ability or the regulations that are put in place to make it more and more difficult to build resource projects or pipelines or mines. But I started to think about that, and through the last 8 years or 10 years, it's gotten harder and harder, but yet our oil and gas producers have produced more oil and gas every year, except for the blip in COVID that the whole world had.
Right.
Our gold businesses and our copper business in the country are very successful. So I went back to the office and I asked our analysts, because I could tell you quickly where we rank on commodity production in the world, whether it's oil and gas or copper or gold. I can put us up against every other country, what we produce in Canada. But then I started to think, well, forget what we produce in Canada. What do we produce as a country, or as a head office? So Lundin Mining, for instance, that produces all of their copper, gold, and nickel elsewhere, but their head office here in Vancouver. And I looked at it, and so we were fifth in gold production in the world as a country, Canada, but as a head office and a corporate entities, we're number one in the world.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. And copper goes from like 13 to 4th or 5th against the big copper producing countries. Right. Oil and gas stays the same. We're 4th, and whoever's 5th, and I know who's 5th, is a long ways behind us. Yeah. So we're so good at this, and we don't talk about it. And our capital markets aren't talking about it as much as they used to, but I still think the majority of the financing in the mining business and resource businesses are still coming from Vancouver, Toronto.
Well, and I think here's what's really important about that, that piece of data is that I don't know if people realize that when you're out and you're exploring or mining, the amount of risks involved in that process are endless.
Right.
And so the one thing you can control is the regulatory framework that you pick. So being a corporate head office in Vancouver means that you are dealing with the BCSE and the exchanges that exist in Canada, whatever marketplace you pick, that these are very, very distinct decisions that people are making on a global level to be coming to Vancouver and Toronto to be able to list their company and raise capital. I think probably it would be interesting to know what the data is as far as where the capital is coming from to finance them. So even if the company, capital is coming from a global perspective, they are still choosing, and mainly Vancouver, Toronto as well, but they're still choosing this jurisdiction to be a public company and raise capital for their very risk operations.
We have favorable treatment of that, particularly for exploration in Canada with flow through and some tax advantage. But I think you're right. I don't think we celebrate it enough now. We've gone through a period here in our country that foreign investment has declined, and I think domestic investment in ourselves has declined. We have to rebuild that. I think we're on the way to doing that. I really do, and I think that we don't celebrate, nor do we talk enough about what makes our country great. I mean, it's not the only thing, but I've always said this: Canada produces two things better than anybody else: hockey players and miners and mining companies.
And you're both of those things.
I'm not a miner. I'm in the mining business, but I'm not technical.
You are a rock star. We love you, Brent. Okay, so you did JDS mining. You had huge success there in what you guys did. Was that all focused in BC, or did you do it all over Canada? So
the company, the consulting and construction and engineering, we work for everybody all over the world, and we have such a great group of professionals, whether engineers or constructors or metallurgical engineers. But what, the side of the business I spent most of my time on is what can we do ourselves? We use the team, and we built a silver lead zinc mine in northern BC. We sold it to Coeur Mining out of Chicago, and that's just a great project. They're not operating right now, but I think in the next few years they will. It'll be a great BC mine. It's a wonderful deposit in a good location. We built a magnetite project in Williams Lake that we produced a very specific grade of magnetite for the coal producers. When you make metallurgical coal, which is steel making coal, you need magnetite to process the coal to basically to clean it and to purify it, to float it. So we did that, and these projects were very unique and very successful. And we loved it. And really, when I entered JDS, mining certainly was my strength. But you build a couple projects and you learn pretty fast.
You learn very fast. That's right. Yeah. Okay, so you've now got a new venture that you're on, because apparently you don't stop. Tell us about your new venture at Dean's Night.
And again, I think people ask you, how'd you get here? And it's like, it's a series of events, and you never know. And I tell that to young people. And I'll just sidebar that. When I speak to young people, nobody knows what they want to do. Like I did as a hockey player, but nobody is 14 or 17 and typically knows what they want to do.
Most 17-year-old boys in Canada want to become hockey players.
That's true.
So that one was an easy one.
That's up there, but it's not going to.
You just did it.
Yeah, true. But I say to them, just do something. Like you don't know what you want to do, so don't cut bait, go fishing. Yeah. And if you do something, it's going to lead you. You're not going to start a job. Even if you come out of university, you're not going to start a job that's it, you're here and you're going to stay here. That's right. It leads to something. So I would say that's what happened. Dean's Night Capital, which I've known, it's a 32-year-old firm founded by Wayne Deans and Doug Knight. And the reputation is fantastic, and I knew that. In 2014, we got close to them because they lent us money. We needed a bridge note, a bridge financing before project financing, and they lent us some money at an extraordinary interest rate. extraordinarily high. And it was a short term. It was a 12 or 18-month note, and we paid the interest and paid all their money back, and we became instant friends. It's funny how much they liked me after they liked Jeff and I after we paid them back. And so they're in the same building, 999 West Hastings, as we are, and kept really close contact. And in 2020, Kelsey Dunwoody, one of the portfolio managers there, she approached me. They only had two strategies the entire existence: the income fund, which is a high yield bond fund, and the Canadian equity fund, which was always had a good and strong weighting in resources, oil and gas and mining. Obviously, being here in Vancouver, yeah. Very successful. So they decided to look at potentially a new strategy. Now, I would say the strategy is just the same in terms of philosophy, but a strategy that only invested in resources. So this sort of the third leg to the stool. And Kelsey approached myself and Jeff and asked us if we wanted to partner up on a strategy like that. And we jumped at it right away. The reputation of Dean's Knight, the success in terms of returns, and when I say reputation, it's beyond reproach, and that's really important to us. And so we started in October 2020, in the depths of COVID, or the beginning of COVID, I guess. And the fund's been very successful in the strategy, and the returns have been very good, and we've been very happy. Late last year, we had an opportunity to buy out two older shareholders and become more involved. And so we did that, and I joined Kelsey and Dylan Cameron as part of the leadership team. So spend lots of time there, and that's really a big focus. And it's just an add-on to trying to build Canada. Like, we need to raise money to invest in great entrepreneurs, not just mining and oil and gas, but great entrepreneurs in our country. We need capital, and the businesses need capital. They need good exchanges to foster that, and we got to get back to building this country. And I think we're gonna get there. We're gonna be on our way.
Do you think maybe politician next, Brent, is coming? Listen, here's what I love about
my wife says the minute he opens his mouth, he's probably unelectable. So anyway,
your wife is a lovely, very intelligent woman. But the one thing I love about Dean's Knight, and I think this is really, really important, especially in the mining space, is that my concern is with the ability to invest on your phone and having no engagement with a salesperson who does this every day for a living, right, and is educated in the space and does their due diligence and has research analysis or analysts behind them, is that we're losing some of that retail community. And as new investors are coming to market, they're not getting that education that we used to get or give as we were brokers.
Right.
Dean's Knight is a perfect example of, I think, what we need to see more of is that you have your, you have your research department, you do your due diligence, you have your experts, and it provides a newer investor, or it provides a strategic investor to be able to invest in the mining space in Canada with professionals behind the scene. So I personally would love to see more of this come to market. Tell us about the fund that you built when you came on.
Yeah, so it's the resource strategy. I mean, the philosophy that Wayne Dean's really built, and Wayne still is part of it. He runs the Canadian Equity Fund. Kelsey Dunwoody runs the resource fund. The philosophy has always been, we don't think like paper traders, and we don't really get too involved in what the stock market might do, could do, will do, because we don't think anybody can predict that. We look at the individual companies, the opportunity, the businesses, and we spend a lot of time with management. And in the mining business, like Jeff and I know a lot of the management teams. It's not that we only want tried and true and tested, because there's young people coming into the business that are good at this, and you do want to back them. But you spend a lot of time understanding what they're trying to do and that they're executing properly. And then when things go wrong, that you can have a conversation that's what went wrong, and that's reasonable in this business because we understand that things go wrong. So I agree with you 100%. We have an investment community now that's much more passive. A lot of people are passive, which I don't think is a bad strategy, by the way, but to overlay a really good portfolio with some active management, and not just by the S&P 500 or the TSX, which are S&P TSX, which are very good vehicles for people to go and invest in. But as we see, most of the attention over the last few years has been on 7 stocks. And that has taken a lot of capital away from growing businesses or small businesses or mid-cap business in the stock exchange, in the market. So we would really like to see that start to revert back. In Canada particularly, it's affected the resource space, and it's harder and harder for people to raise money.
Absolutely.
And that does slow down our economy, which I don't think people would quickly associate that with the jobs and
Absolutely.
The GDP of our country. So we do think it's going to change. We're out promoting that. I know you are.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, we need the country needs capital to build infrastructure, to build resource projects, to build bridges, and to build pipelines.
I've been watching CSE financing specifically, not on the other exchanges, but I've noticed in the last 3 months an increase in financings, the size of financings, and the depth of them. Are you seeing that as well at Dean's Night? Are you seeing a bit of more activity coming to market?
I think certainly we are. I think gold is the one in the spotlight right now, and that's excellent. I think some of our gold companies have done an incredible job, not because gold is $2,700 or $2,650 an ounce, but before that we were seeing that they were very disciplined with their capital.
Yeah.
They were starting to maybe buy back shares or pay dividends, which is really healthy. And those companies have done well. The lower, the smaller cap is starting to pop up, and then I think what you're going to see is, and you mentioned it, not you're going to see it, but it's starting to come, as more capital allocated to gold exploration. We would say that copper has been, fits and stops where people are really bullish about the price of copper. As professionals, we don't, again, think about the price of gold that much, nor the price of copper. And we would love to tell you that we've had a lot of success in the resource fund this year because we predicted gold was going to go to $2,650. We didn't. We really liked the businesses we owned. Some of the development projects, we've lost 2 of them to buyouts, Filo and Osisko Mining. Mm-hmm. But we come back to approaching it that way. But we do think, we could be primed for more cash coming into the resource sector, whether it's internal first, and then obviously the behemoth south of us. When those investors may get interested, they will look to Canada for resources. So it could get really interesting, and we'd like to be in the way of that.
So I heard this interesting piece of data when I was down in the States last at a conference, is that the United States represents 62.5% of global capital, equity capital.
Right.
Canada represents 2.5%.
Right.
And I think, again, it goes back to this idea that Canada has built this amazing platform or stage,
right.
If you will, for accessing capital markets. We've got fungibility with the U.S., which makes it incredibly easy to be able to trade back and forth with U.S. investors. And getting access to that capital now, I think, is maybe one of the key focuses that our issuers are starting to work towards. I would assume that you guys are in a position in these markets that you get to be very choosy of what you want to invest in. Now, this is all within the borders of Canada that you invest, right?
So we don't have any mandate that stops us.
Okay.
But it's our backyard. It's our competency level.
Yeah.
We really believe we have an advantage with the Canadian companies. But having said that, a lot of our head office, Vancouver, Toronto companies are producing their commodities elsewhere. Right. And that's important too, because like I said, we export our hockey players because they're the best, and we export our mining competency all over the world, and that's great for Canadians. It's Absolutely. Great for Canadian, engineers, geologists. Like, there's such a great opportunity for young people to be in the mining business. We don't celebrate it in the schools enough. We need to, but again, I hope we go through a whether you call it a bull run or just attention being put back on our resource businesses. And everybody does want to talk ESG, I think if you talk to the oil and gas and mining businesses, like, this is not something new that because Wall Street started talking about it 5 years ago with their point score. CSR has always been part of it. In the 50s it was different, in the 70s it was different, in the 90s, but
so CSR, just for our listeners
that
might be might be an old terminology.
Corporate social responsibility,
right.
you know, and there was always different names for it. HSE for health and safety and environment. We've had all kinds of acronyms. It's been a bit hijacked by Wall Street and people who think they can write scores on it. But the fact is Canadian mining companies act very responsibly.
That's right.
They're mandated too, but I think we do it. They also work in countries that the mandates aren't the same, but when they're on the stock exchange, they are mandated to act like as if they were in Canada. So I think it's excellent. We keep getting better and better at it.
Yeah.
Although we seem to, criticize ourselves for it. No, we get better and better at it, and we will, in 10 years it'll be better than it is. So that's something we have to celebrate. As far as, the energy transition and trying to reduce CO2, I believe the path we're on is not going to reduce CO2. I think it's very difficult just to come up with attitudes that we're going to eliminate oil and gas from our economy. That is a lot more challenging than people think, and it really ends up feeding 8.5 billion people. So I think we have to rethink that. Yeah. And I think Canada, I think we could lead the world in talking about, how we improve the environment, not trying to eliminate something that is pretty impossible.
So you're talking about the electrification transition that has been top of the news story for a few years, and I think perhaps been leading the markets actually in a way of, investors are gobbling up this idea of this electrification process, whether it's battery metals, right, rare earth, critical minerals. There might be a bit of a pop in that idea, do you think? And we might be starting to rethink things that maybe reduce, reuse, recycle might come back to the forefront a little bit, as opposed to dropping everything that we've constructed to this point and starting over again.
Yeah, well, I think it's really challenging to say that electricity is going to run the world. It can't run the world.
That's right.
We have physical, tasks that aren't able to be run by the grid. To electrify with solar and wind is very difficult. It's an intermittent power generator. Hydro's fantastic, but it does have a limit of geography.
Yeah.
And nuclear is fantastic as well. It's just come up against a lot of regulation, and a lot of people don't think it's the right way to go. To try to eliminate oil and gas, basically fossil energy from our economy is a lot more difficult. And I think to say it is easy, and a lot of people say it, and we call that platitudes, not physics.
Right.
And we like to say that physics, at the end of the day, between platitudes and physics is undefeated.
Yeah.
And that's not my line. I wish it was, but it's from a publication called Doomberg. And we can't just say it without actually having some backup. And I would just say, people need to educate themselves, or we need to educate people better on, where things come from in the world.
Right.
And electricity doesn't come from the light socket.
That's right.
So
this might be shocking news to you all.
But we've become so wealthy and so successful in the Western world that we never really had to worry about that.
That's right.
So to say, I want to be super clean in the environment, so I want to get rid of oil, it's really easy to say that when you don't think about what oil actually does for us.
That's right.
And that's our message is we're environmentalists. But we know that extraction of resources keeps everybody alive. Mm-hmm. So how do we get better? We get better, and we keep getting better. But I think if we spend capital in the right places, we'll improve. A lot of the capital, in my mind, is misallocated, and it's going to run into a dead end and not really achieve the goal that you set out to do, but also to actually benefit society.
Okay, so on that note, what advice do you give young or new investors who want to invest in the mining and exploration space? Where should they go and get this information? And what advice do you give them?
Wow. I mean, I could cite a lot of books, but I think, you know, there's amazing podcasts out there now. I mean, I don't think you're finding it in the mainstream media.
Okay.
I don't think they're digging deep enough. I mean,
Okay.
mainstream media is fast and
Yeah.
it's boom, 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 and you got to read it. And so there's great podcasts out there. A couple Canadian podcasts, Decouple is
Okay.
fantastic.
Okay.
Dr. Chris Kiefer, he is a big advocate of nuclear.
Okay.
And that's great. But he has excellent guests. Another one is Arc Energy out of Calgary. Check that out. Just do a really and I would say that these are all people that are very concerned with the environment, and so they're not coming from a
They're
place.
not being paid
No, they're
to
but
have
I
a
don't-
voice or an opinion.
No, so they bring on guests to make us understand our energy complex,
Okay.
where things come from, and what oil does to us, or for us, and what gas does for us, and copper, and all the things that go into everything we build, everything we eat, and it's just one big circle that never ends.
Right.
And to think we can pull one of those chains out would make it very difficult to live the way we live.
Right.
And then we have another part of the world that is not as wealthy as we are, is not, advanced technologically. Do you think they're about to give up the things that made us wealthy, that
Yeah.
we should tell them, hey, you guys can't use this product anymore? It's like, well, it kind of made you guys all wealthy.
That's right.
So I think the
That's
energy,
interesting.
no pun intended, the energy is spent in the wrong places, and
Right.
a lot of the money is spent in the wrong places.
Right. Okay, if we want to know more about Dean's Night, where do we find information about it?
Well, the website's great, and
Okay.
we pride ourselves at Dean's Night on, when you call Dean's Night, you don't go to a press 5, press 6. We pride ourselves on there. We're a small team, but somebody picks the phone up.
That is crucial these days, I think.
We like to talk to people
Yeah.
on the phone. We even like to talk to them in person better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's end off with one final question. What do you think is next for us in the mining space? Is there a commodity that you think is going to be on fire? Is there a jurisdiction? What are your thoughts? What's your glass ball tell you?
Yeah, so we don't predict anything.
I know.
And
Compliance won't let you do that.
No, and we don't anyway. We don't in our own minds. I would say this to you, that we prefer what we would call the staples of life.
Okay.
We like oil and gas. We love our Canadian producers. We think they're the best in the world now, from an environmental standard to a capital discipline to a profitability. They're just amazing what they're doing. And we've tied one hand behind their back too. If we ever give them both hands, it'd be incredible. So we like oil and gas. We like copper a lot, and we do like the precious metals. We think, and we don't, it's not because gold's had an incredible run and silver's had a pretty good run too. It's because we really like, the old adage, it's a gold mine. Well, when you do have a good gold mine, it really makes a lot of money. And it doesn't necessarily matter that the price is really high or not.
Yeah.
Good gold mines they make a lot of margin. So we like that business. We do like the staples. And we do invest in, the uranium space, the forestry space, and a little bit of the iron ore space. There's always different commodities in there, but really, we're chasing that business that's really interesting to us, a project or a management team.
I love it. Brent, it's always so great to chat with you. We have to do this again.
Anytime. This is a lot of fun. Always, Anna. Enjoy spending time with you.
Thank you, Brent.
Great. Thank you.